The Lazarus Protocol. This is a true story. I know because I am the one who created it. My name is Sarah Vance. 18 months ago, I was the director of viral research at a facility that does not exist on any map. Now I am hiding in a cheap motel near the Mexican border, recording everything before they find me. If you are listening to this, please believe what I am about to tell you. And whatever you do, never open the door if you hear knocking at 3 in the morning, because it is not a person on the other side. It is never a person. Before I continue, I need you to understand something important. I am not insane. I hold a doctorate from Johns Hopkins University. I spent 12 years at the Centers for Disease Control. I published research in Nature, The Lancet, and a dozen other peer-reviewed journals. I believed in the scientific method. I believed in evidence and data and the observable universe. I do not believe in those things anymore. There are entities that exist beyond the reach of microscopes and laboratory equipment, ancient things that have been waiting in the darkness since before humanity learned to make fire. I was foolish enough to set them free. Let me start from the beginning. 5 years ago, a man in a black suit appeared at my apartment at 2 in the morning. He did not introduce himself. He showed me credentials with an eagle insignia and a designation I had never encountered before. He told me the government required my expertise for a project of national importance. He mentioned a salary 10 times what I earned at the CDC. I should have refused. I should have shut the door and returned to bed and forgotten the entire encounter. But my daughter Emily had died 18 months earlier. Leukemia. She was 7 years old. I watched her deteriorate in a hospital bed, watched her hair fall out in clumps, watched the spark fade from her eyes until nothing remained. When you lose a child, something inside you dies alongside them. You become an empty vessel moving through the world, performing the rituals of daily life without feeling anything. The man in the black suit offered me purpose. He offered me a reason to continue existing. He offered me a chance to ensure no other mother would have to watch her daughter die the way I watched mine. He claimed the project was about curing disease, every pathogen that had ever afflicted humanity. He was lying. The facility was designated Site 7. It was buried 200 meters beneath the Nevada desert, approximately 150 kilometers from Las Vegas. The surface installation resembled an abandoned mining operation. Corroded equipment, desert scrub, a chain-link fence with weathered signs warning about private property. Beneath that unremarkable exterior lay something else entirely. A maze of concrete corridors and reinforced steel doors and laboratories containing equipment worth more than the annual budgets of small nations. The elevator descent took 4 minutes. 4 minutes of dropping into the earth while pressure built in your ears and fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Death prefers deep places, I would learn. It favors the dark. The first thing I noticed about Site 7 was the odor. Industrial disinfectant, the variety that burns your sinuses and leaves a chemical residue on your tongue. But beneath that sterile perfume lurked something else, something ancient, a sweetness that had no place in a government installation, like overripe fruit. Like flesh left too long in the sun. I inquired about it once. My supervisor, Dr. Harrison, attributed it to the ventilation system. Old pipes, he said, nothing concerning. I learned quickly not to ask questions at Site 7. The second thing I noticed was the sound. The ventilation system operated continuously, producing a low drone you could feel in your chest. But occasionally late at night, when the corridors emptied, and most staff retreated to their quarters, I would hear other sounds. Footsteps where no one walked, whispers in languages I could not identify. Once I could have sworn I heard a child laughing somewhere deep in the facility. I convinced myself it was imagination. I convinced myself the isolation was affecting my mind. Site 7 altered people. We worked in 2-week rotations, sealed underground with no contact with the outside world, no telephone calls, no emails, no sunlight, just the eternal drone of ventilation and the flicker of fluorescent lights and the gradual erosion of everything that made you human. The third thing I noticed was the darkness, not the absence of illumination. Site 7 was well lit, almost aggressively so. I mean a different kind of darkness, a presence, a weight in the atmosphere that pressed against your skin when you walked through certain corridors. The sensation of being observed by something you could not perceive. I was assigned to Laboratory 7, which the staff called the Vault, because of its reinforced walls and triple-layered security protocols. My official duty was studying viral mutations. The reality was something far worse. On my third day, Dr. Harrison introduced me to the project that would eventually destroy everything. He called it the Lazarus Protocol. The name should have been my first warning. In the Bible, Lazarus was the man Christ raised from the dead. But Dr. Harrison did not seem like a religious man. He seemed like someone who had stopped believing in anything except the work. He showed me the samples first. They were stored in a cryogenic containment unit at -80 degrees Celsius, each vial labeled with alphanumeric codes that meant nothing to me. The liquid inside was black. Not dark red or brown like aged blood, black like ink, black like the void between stars. The samples had been recovered from Iraq in 2003, Dr. Harrison explained. A military archaeological team had discovered an ancient tomb beneath the ruins of Babylon. The tomb contained 7 bodies, all bound in chains, their mouths packed with salt and garlic. The walls were covered in Sumerian inscriptions. One inscription had been translated. It read, "Never open this place. They are not dead. They are waiting." The military opened it anyway. Of course they did. That is what militaries do. They discover ancient warnings about unspeakable evil and ignore them because they cannot accept that some things should remain buried. 3 members of the archaeological team perished within 48 hours, not from violence, from something far worse. They began screaming about voices in their heads. They clawed at their own skin until they reached bone. They bit off their own tongues to stop themselves from speaking words in a language that had been extinct for 5,000 years. The remaining team members were quarantined. The samples were extracted and transported to Site 7. The tomb was sealed with concrete, and the incident was classified at the highest level. That was 15 years before my arrival. In those 15 years, the scientists at Site 7 had discovered many things about the black substance from the tomb. They learned it was not a virus in any conventional sense. It was something older, something that had existed before life appeared on Earth, waiting in the spaces between molecules for a host to inhabit. They learned it could reanimate dead tissue, but not in a way that restored life. In a different way. A wrong way. And they learned that the reanimated subjects retained their consciousness. That final detail haunted me more than anything else. The subjects knew what was happening to them. They could feel their bodies decomposing around them, could feel the hunger for human flesh growing inside them, but they could not stop it. They were prisoners in their own rotting bodies, watching themselves commit atrocities, while some other intelligence controlled their actions. General Victor Varen, the director of Site 7, wanted to weaponize it. Some men are born for destruction even when they wear the mask of patriots. Varen was one of them. He viewed the black substance not as an abomination that needed to be destroyed, but as an opportunity, a weapon that could transform enemy populations into mindless cannibals, a plague that could bring any nation to its knees without firing a single shot. My assignment was to make it airborne. I want you to understand that I had no choice. Varen made abundantly clear what would happen to me if I refused. What would happen to my mother in her nursing home in Philadelphia? What would happen to everyone I had ever known or cared about? But I am not seeking sympathy. I did what I did. I created a monster, and now the world is burning because of it. I spent 18 months perfecting the aerosolized delivery system. 18 months breathing recycled air and sleeping in a windowless room and slowly losing my grasp on what was real and what was not. The isolation worked on me like acid, dissolving the boundaries between my waking hours and my nightmares. That is when the strange occurrences began. The first incident happened on a Tuesday night. I was working late calibrating the dispersal mechanism. The time was 1:30 in the morning. The laboratory was empty. Everyone else had retired for the night. I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, heavy footsteps, slow and deliberate. Not the quick stride of a security guard making rounds. Something else. Something that dragged slightly with each step, like a foot that did not function properly. I checked the security monitor. The corridor was empty. I told myself it was the pipes, the aging infrastructure, sound traveling through the walls in strange ways, but I did not believe it. The second incident occurred 3 days later. I was examining samples under the microscope when I felt it. A coldness on the back of my neck, the sensation of breath against my skin. I spun around. The laboratory was empty, but on the glass window of the containment unit there was a mark. A smudge of condensation, as if someone had breathed on it from the other side. And in that condensation I could see the outline of a handprint. A small handprint, the size a child would make. I cleaned the glass and convinced myself it was nothing. Temperature differential. Humidity fluctuation. Anything but what it appeared to be. What we cannot explain, we deny. That is how we survive. The third incident was different. The third incident I could not rationalize away. I woke one morning and went to the small kitchen area in our dormitory to prepare coffee. I always kept my mug on the left side of the counter beside the coffee maker. A simple white mug with the CDC logo, a remnant from my previous life. The mug was missing. I found it on my nightstand, in my bedroom, a place I never brought food or beverages. Inside the mug was a folded piece of paper. Written on it in handwriting I did not recognize were 4 words, "We see you." I told myself it was a prank, someone on the staff amusing themselves. Perhaps Marcus, the lab technician who worked the night shift? He had an odd sense of humor. But Marcus was dead. He had perished 6 months before my arrival. A laboratory accident, according to official records. I later discovered that 3 other researchers had died in similar accidents over the previous 2 years. All of them had been working on the Lazarus protocol. All of them had reported strange occurrences before their deaths. Footsteps, whispers, objects moving on their own. The facility had developed a reputation among the veteran staff members. They called it the tomb, not because of the Iraqi samples, because people entered and did not leave. I should have departed. I should have demanded a transfer, threatened to expose everything, done anything to escape that place. But by then I was in too deep. I knew too much. And Varen had made clear that the only way out of Site 7 was in a body bag. So I continued working. I continued convincing myself the noises were in my head, and the handprint was condensation, and the note was a sick joke. I continued perfecting the weapon that would eventually kill millions. And then Colonel Kane Morrison arrived. I remember the day he entered the briefing room. The atmosphere seemed to transform. The temperature dropped. Even General Varen, who feared nothing and no one, appeared to diminish in his presence. Morrison was tall, 6'5", perhaps 6'6". His entire body was encased in tactical armor, matte black and segmented like the carapace of some enormous insect. But it was the mask that commanded attention, a featureless plate of dark metal covering his entire head with a breathing apparatus that produced a wet, rasping sound with every inhalation, like lungs that did not function properly, like a man who should have been dead but somehow persisted. The eyes behind the mask glowed red in the dim light. I initially thought it was a trick of the fluorescent bulbs. Later I discovered the truth. There is no way to observe some men without seeing the death they carry within them. Morrison was such a man. He had killed more people than most soldiers kill in a dozen wars. He had committed acts in the name of duty that would make demons weep. And somewhere along the way, the man he had been had died, leaving only this walking weapon in his place. I learned his history later in fragments and whispers. 15 years ago, Morrison had commanded an elite unit called Omega Team. The finest soldiers in the military, hand-picked from special forces and trained for operations that did not officially exist. They discovered that Site-7 was conducting experiments on prisoners of war, human beings transformed into test subjects for the black substance. Omega Team objected. General Varen called it treason. Morrison was given a choice: execute his own men to prove his loyalty or die alongside them. He chose survival. No one knows exactly what transpired during the purge. The records were destroyed, but Morrison emerged from it broken. His body was devastated, 80% burns, lungs scarred beyond repair. Most of his internal organs replaced with cybernetic substitutes that hummed and clicked beneath his armor. He became Varen's instrument, his attack dog, the monster the general unleashed when he needed something accomplished that no human being should do. And he was the one who delivered my final orders. The briefing was brief. Varen wanted the aerosolized virus ready for deployment within 6 months. Morrison would oversee the operation personally. I nodded and said nothing. What else could I do? But as the meeting concluded and the other officers departed, Morrison remained. He stood in the corner, watching me with those red eyes, his breathing apparatus marking time like a mechanical heartbeat. When we were alone, he spoke. His voice was deep and distorted by the mask like gravel scraping against metal. "You understand what you are creating?" It was not a question. I said yes. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said something I did not understand until much later. Something that haunts me still. Some doors once opened can never be closed, and some things are better left buried in the dark. Then he departed. That night I completed the final calibration. The aerosolized virus was finished. 18 months of work condensed into a dozen pressurized canisters that could be deployed from aircraft or inserted into ventilation systems. I should have felt something: pride, horror, guilt, anything. Instead, I felt hollow, as if the thing I had created had emptied me out and left nothing behind. I was washing my hands in the laboratory sink when I heard it. A voice, not from outside, from inside my head. "Thank you for setting us free." I turned around. The laboratory was empty, but in the glass of the containment unit I saw my reflection. It was smiling. I was not smiling. And behind me in the glass I could see them. Dozens of shadows standing in rows, their shapes wrong, their proportions twisted, waiting. I blinked and they vanished. But the smile on my reflection remained for 3 more seconds before it finally faded. That was the night before everything collapsed. That was the night before the outbreak. And even now, hiding in this motel room with the curtains drawn and the door locked, I can still feel them watching me. They are coming for me. They are coming for all of us. The outbreak began at 3 in the morning. I was in my quarters when the alarms erupted. Not the routine security alerts that sounded when someone forgot their key card or wandered into a restricted area. This was different. A shrieking wail that bored into your skull and refused to stop. Red emergency lights strobing in the corridor outside my door, transforming the world into a nightmare of shadows and crimson. I grabbed my lab coat and ID badge out of habit. The reflexes of a normal life in a situation that had already become anything but normal. The first thing I noticed when I opened my door was the smell. The disinfectant odor that had always permeated Site-7 had vanished, replaced by something else. Copper and rust, and beneath it all that same sweet rotting scent I had tried so hard to ignore for 18 months, but stronger now. So strong it coated the back of my throat and made me gag. The second thing I noticed was the screaming. Not the alarm. Human screaming. Dozens of voices overlapping into a chorus of pure terror, rising from below, from the laboratory levels. I should have remained in my room. I should have barricaded the door and hidden under my bed and waited for someone to rescue me. But I was the director of viral research. If something had gone wrong with the project, I needed to know. I ran toward the screaming. The elevator was not functioning. The display showed an error code I had never encountered before, red numbers flashing angrily. I took the emergency stairs, descending into the depths of Site-7. while the alarms wailed, and the emergency lights painted everything the color of blood. I made it down 2 levels before I found the first body. It was Dr. Harrison, my supervisor, the man who had recruited me into this nightmare. He was lying face down in a spreading pool of something dark, his white lab coat soaked through. I thought he had fallen initially. A heart attack, perhaps brought on by the stress of whatever was occurring. Then I saw what had been done to his back. Something had torn him open from shoulders to waist. His spine was visible, white bone gleaming wetly in the strobing light. His ribs had been cracked outward as if someone had pried him apart to reach what lay inside. And his organs, his kidneys and liver and lungs, they were gone, scooped out and taken. I vomited against the wall. I could not help it. 18 months of working with the most dangerous pathogen in human history, and I had never witnessed anything like this. The violence of it, the hunger. When I finished retching, I heard something that turned the vomit to ice in my stomach. Chewing, wet, deliberate chewing, coming from around the corner. I should have run. Every survival instinct screamed at me to turn around and flee back up those stairs and never look back. But something else drove me forward. The same terrible curiosity that had led me to accept Varen's offer in the first place. The need to understand even when understanding meant destruction. I crept to the corner and looked. It was Subject 47. The prisoner we had infected 6 months ago as part of the initial trials. He had been catatonic for weeks, displaying no signs of higher brain function, just the basic autonomic responses that kept his decomposing body moving. We thought the virus had destroyed his consciousness entirely. We were wrong. He was crouched over another body. Dr. Chen, I realized. The immunologist who worked in the lab adjacent to mine. Subject 47 had torn open her skull and was scooping handfuls of gray matter into his mouth. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was his face. He was smiling. Grinning with lips that had rotted away to expose blackened gums and teeth that had grown too long for his mouth, and his eyes. His eyes were aware, intelligent, observing me with something that might have been amusement. When he spoke, fragments of brain fell from his mouth. "Hello, Dr. Vance. Thank you for the meal." I ran. I do not remember making the decision. My body simply moved some primitive part of my brain, overriding everything else and sending me sprinting back toward the stairs. Behind me, I heard Subject 47 laugh, a wet, gurgling sound that echoed off the concrete walls. He did not pursue me. He did not need to. There were 46 others. The containment breach had released all of them. Every test subject we had infected over the past 18 months. Every prisoner and volunteer and unfortunate soul who had been fed to the black substance in the name of national security. They were free now, spreading through Site 7 like a plague within a plague. I made it back to my quarters and slammed the door and shoved my desk against it and huddled in the corner while the world ended around me. The sounds that penetrated that door will haunt me until I die. Screaming, always screaming. But not just screaming. Sounds that had no place in any reality I wanted to inhabit. The wet tearing of flesh, the crack of bones being broken, the slurping and chewing and swallowing of things that used to be people. And the voices. The subjects had not spoken during their months of captivity. We thought the virus destroyed the speech centers of the brain along with everything else that made them human. But now they talked. They called out names. The names of their victims, the names of people they had known before infection. They laughed and whispered and sometimes sang in languages that had been dead for millennia. Through the door I heard one of them say my name, Sarah. Sarah Vance. We know you are in there. We can smell your fear. I did not answer. I pressed my hand over my mouth to prevent myself from screaming, and I did not answer. "We will save you for last, Sarah, because you made us. You gave us this gift. We want to thank you properly." Then the lights went out, not just in my room, everywhere. The emergency lighting died, plunging Site 7 into absolute darkness. The alarms fell silent. Even the ventilation system stopped its eternal drone, replaced by a silence so complete it pressed against my eardrums like a physical weight. In that silence I heard them moving, footsteps in the corridor, dozens of them, hundreds, shuffling and dragging and scraping against the concrete floor. I fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up, casting a pale blue glow across my room, and I nearly wept with relief. Then I attempted to make a call. No signal. Of course, there was no signal. We were 200 meters underground. The facility's communication system was the only way to reach the surface, and the facility's communication system was dead. I switched to the radio function. Every Site 7 employee carried a two-way radio for emergencies. Mine crackled to life, filling the room with static. "Hello, can anyone hear me? This is Dr. Vance. Please respond." Static, white noise, and then words, barely audible beneath the crackling, a whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "We hear you, Sarah. The radio died." The screen flickered once and displayed two words before going dark forever. "We hear." I threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, and I did not care. I was alone in the dark with monsters outside my door and no way to call for help and no way to escape. That was when I remembered the security monitors. Every room in Site 7 had a small terminal that could access the facility's camera network. It was designed for emergencies, a way to assess threats before opening your door. I had never used mine. I had never needed to. I crawled across the floor in the darkness, feeling my way to the desk I had pushed against the door. The terminal was built into the wall beside it. I found the power button by touch and pressed it. The screen flickered to life. What I saw on those cameras still visits me in my nightmares. Every night, without fail. Site 7 had become a slaughterhouse. The corridors were painted with blood. Bodies lay everywhere, some whole, some in pieces, some so thoroughly destroyed that they were merely smears of red and pink and white on the concrete walls. The subjects moved among the carnage like sharks in bloody water, feeding and killing and feeding again. But that was not the worst of it. Some of the bodies were rising. I watched on the monitor as a dead security guard twitched and convulsed and then climbed to his feet with movements that were wrong, puppet-like, as if invisible strings were pulling him upright. His throat had been torn out. His intestines hung from a ragged hole in his stomach, dragging on the ground behind him. But he stood. He walked. He joined the others. The virus was spreading. Everyone who died was returning. Everyone who had been bitten. Everyone who had been scratched. Everyone who had so much as touched the infected blood. They were all turning. The population of Site 7 was not decreasing as the subjects killed their way through the facility. It was increasing. I cycled through the cameras searching for survivors, searching for anyone who might still be alive, searching for some hope in this ocean of horror. I found nothing but death. And then I found something worse. One of the subjects had stopped in front of a camera. Not just paused, but stopped deliberately. He was staring directly into the lens with his decaying face and his empty eye sockets and his mouth full of someone else's flesh. He raised one rotting hand and waved. Then he leaned closer to the camera and opened his mouth and spoke. I could not hear him through the monitor, but I could read his lips. "Hello, Sarah. We are coming for you now." I slammed my fist against the power button. The screen went dark. The knocking started 30 seconds later. Not pounding, not scratching. Gentle knocking like a neighbor coming to borrow sugar. "Sarah." The voice on the other side was familiar. Too familiar. It belonged to Dr. Park, the young researcher I'd eaten lunch with just yesterday. "Open the door, Sarah. Go away," I whispered. "We just want to talk. We just want to thank you for everything you have done. Please go away. Your daughter is here, Sarah." I stopped breathing. "Emily. She's been waiting for you, in the dark, in the space between death and what comes after. She misses her mother." I screamed. I could not help it. The name of my dead daughter in that thing's mouth was more than I could bear. The knocking stopped, but I could hear breathing on the other side of the door, wet, rattling breaths that went on and on. Then footsteps, moving away, growing fainter. They were gone, but I knew they would return. I do not know how long I sat in that room, hours, perhaps an eternity of darkness and distant screaming, and the constant awareness that death was waiting just outside my door. At some point, the screaming stopped, not gradually, but all at once, as if someone had thrown a switch. The silence that followed was somehow worse. The silence meant there was no one left to scream. That was when I heard the fighting. Not screaming, fighting. The clash of metal against something wet and soft. Grunts of exertion. The thud of bodies hitting the floor. And beneath it all, a sound I recognized. The wet, rasping breath of a respirator. Morrison, I pressed my ear against the door. The sounds were getting closer, more impacts, more bodies falling, and then footsteps, heavy and deliberate, stopping right outside my room. 3 knocks, different from before, stronger, more purposeful. Dr. Vance. The voice was deep and distorted by a mask. Come with me if you want to survive. I pushed the desk away from the door. I do not know why I trusted him. Perhaps because his voice was the only human sound I had heard in hours. Perhaps because I was desperate enough to follow anyone who was not trying to eat me. I opened the door. Kane Morrison stood in the corridor, surrounded by destruction. A dozen infected lay at his feet, carved into pieces so small they could never rise again. In his hand was a weapon unlike anything I had ever seen. A blade, but not any blade I had ever encountered. It looked like it was made of obsidian or black glass, but it pulsed with a faint red light that seemed to come from within. Ancient symbols were carved into the handle. Sumerian, I realized. The same language from the tomb in Babylon. We need to move, Morrison said. More are coming. What is that weapon? Something that can kill them permanently. He turned and started walking. Stay close, do not fall behind. I followed. The journey through Site 7 was a descent through hell. The corridors were painted with blood and decorated with body parts. The infected were everywhere, but Morrison carved through them without hesitation. His blade sang through the air, leaving nothing but ash in its wake. Where are we going? I asked. Emergency hangar. There's an aircraft. What about other survivors? There are no other survivors. The words hit me like a physical blow. 200 people had worked at Site 7. Scientists, technicians, security personnel, support staff. All of them gone. All of them dead or transformed into something that was not quite either. Morrison handed me a blade as we walked. Smaller than his, but with the same red glow and the same ancient symbols. Do you know how to use this number? Point the sharp end at anything that moves. That is all you need to know. I clutched the blade and followed him deeper into the facility. We reached the hangar 20 minutes later. It was empty except for a single aircraft, a sleek military transport that looked fast enough to outrun anything. Morrison stopped at the entrance. I need to tell you something, he said, before we leave. What? He was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, softer, almost human. 15 years ago, I killed everyone I cared about to save my own life. I told myself it was necessary. I told myself I had no choice. But there was always a choice. I was just too afraid to make it. Why are you telling me this? Because of what is about to happen. Because you need to understand what I am. Before I could ask what he meant, I heard them. Not the shuffling footsteps of regular infected, something different, more coordinated, more purposeful. 4 figures emerged from the darkness at the far end of the hangar. They moved in perfect formation like soldiers, because that is what they had been. They wore military uniforms, old, faded, stained with 15 years of grave dirt. Each one carried a blade like Morrison's, but their blades pulsed with different colors, blue, green, yellow, purple, and they were smiling. The one in front stepped forward. He might have been handsome once before the decay set in. Now he was a nightmare of exposed bone and rotting flesh, his jaw hanging at an angle that suggested it had been broken and never healed. Kane. The voice was a ruin, but the words were clear. It has been too long, old friend. Morrison went rigid beside me. Theron. You remember? I am touched. The corpse spread its arms wide. The whole team is here, Kane. Everyone you murdered. Everyone you left to rot in unmarked graves. The other 3 corpses stepped forward. I saw now that they all bore the same insignia on their decaying uniforms, a skull with wings, Omega Team, Morrison's former unit. The soldiers he had been forced to execute 15 years ago. They had been brought back. 15 years we waited in the dark, Theron continued, feeling our flesh rot, feeling the worms crawl through what was left of us, but we did not mind. We knew you would return eventually. We knew we would have our revenge. I had no choice, Morrison said. His voice was barely audible. Varen would have killed everyone. Theron laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. Your family. Yes. Let us discuss your family, Kane. Let us discuss the son you hid from everyone. Michael, living on that little farm in Arizona thinking he was safe. Morrison went completely still. Oh yes, Theron smiled. We know all about him. We know where he lives. We know what he looks like. And right now, some of our brothers and sisters are paying him a visit. You are lying. Am I? Theron tilted his head at an inhuman angle. You should hurry, Kane. It is a long way to Arizona, and Michael's foster parents are already dead. It would be a shame if you arrived too late to save your son as well. Morrison attacked. His blade sang through the air, and Theron barely parried their weapons, meeting with a sound like thunder. The other 3 Omega corpses lunged forward, and suddenly the hangar was chaos. I pressed myself against the wall, clutching the blade Morrison had given me, too terrified to use it. The battle before me was beyond anything I could comprehend. 5 warriors moving at speeds that should not have been possible, their weapons leaving trails of colored light in the darkness. Morrison was outnumbered, but he fought like something inhuman. His blade was everywhere, blocking strikes that should have killed him, finding gaps in defenses that should not have existed. But he was taking wounds. A slash across his chest that exposed metal beneath his skin. A stab to his shoulder that made his arm go limp before the cybernetics compensated. A cut across his face that added another scar to his collection. One by one he cut them down. The green-bladed corpse first bisected at the waist, then the yellow its head removed in a single stroke. Then the purple impaled through the chest and lifted off the ground before being thrown aside. Finally, only Theron remained. They faced each other across a floor slick with blood and ash. Morrison was breathing hard, his remaining flesh pale with exertion. Theron was grinning, his broken jaw hanging open. You have improved, Theron said. I have had time to practice. It will not matter. Even if you kill me, you cannot save Michael. Our brothers are already there. They are already feeding, Morrison screamed. It was not a battle cry. It was the sound of a man losing everything he had left. He attacked with a fury that defied description. Theron tried to block, tried to parry, tried to retreat. It did not matter. Morrison's blade found its mark again and again, carving pieces from the corpse until there was nothing left but ash and a blue blade lying on the ground. Morrison stood over the remains of his former friend, his chest heaving. Then he turned to me. Stay here. Wait for rescue. Tell them what happened. What about you? I have to reach Arizona. I have to save my son. He did not wait for my response. He climbed into the aircraft. The engines fired and the hangar doors opened and the craft rose into the Nevada night. I watched him disappear. Then I heard them behind me. More infected, drawn by the sounds of battle. Dozens of them pouring into the hangar from every entrance. I had a blade, but I was not a warrior. I ran. I thought I'd found my way out. I was wrong. The nightmare had only begun. The emergency elevator was my only option. It connected the hangar level to a concealed exit point 3 miles from the main facility, a fail-safe designed for exactly this kind of catastrophic breach. If I could reach it, I could escape. But the infected were between me and the elevator. I could hear them in the corridors ahead, their shuffling footsteps and wet breathing echoing off the concrete walls. They knew I was here. They could smell my fear. The ventilation shafts were my only chance. The main corridors were too exposed, too easy for them to trap me. But the ventilation system ran through the entire facility, a network of metal tunnels just wide enough for a person to crawl through. I had studied the schematics during my orientation. I found an access panel on the second level. The screws were corroded, and I broke 2 fingernails prying it open, but eventually the panel came free. The shaft beyond was dark and cramped and filled with a smell that made my stomach lurch. Decomposition. Something had died in here recently. I climbed in anyway. Crawling through those shafts was like crawling through the intestines of some vast dead animal. The metal was slick with condensation. Or at least I told myself it was condensation. I did not want to consider what else it might be. The sounds were worse than the smell. Every noise I made echoed through the shaft, bouncing back at me, distorted and multiplied. My own breathing sounded like the rasping of something inhuman. My heartbeat was a drum, announcing my presence to anything listening. And something was listening. I heard it behind me, a scraping sound. Metal on metal, getting closer. I crawled faster. The shaft branched ahead, left toward the main laboratory wing, right toward the elevator access. I went right, pulling myself along on my elbows, trying not to think about the darkness pressing in from all sides. The scraping sound was still behind me. Closer now. I could hear breathing mixed with it. Wet, gurgling breathing. I found the blockage 20 meters from my destination. A body, wedged in the shaft ahead of me. Too large to go around, too stuck to push through. I recognized him by his uniform. Danny, the young technician who had been transferred to Site 7 2 weeks before the outbreak. He had tried to escape through the ventilation system just like me. He had almost made it. Something had caught him from behind. The lower half of his body was gone. Just gone. His intestines trailed back down the shaft like a grotesque tail disappearing into the darkness behind me. But his face was still intact, and his eyes were open. He saw me. His mouth moved. A whisper so faint I almost did not hear it. "Run!" I looked down the shaft behind me. In the dim light filtering through a distant grate, I saw something moving. Something with too many limbs. Something wearing Danny's lower half like a trophy. I scrambled over his body. I felt things tear and compress beneath me. I felt his ribs crack under my weight. I did not care. I did not stop. The grate to the elevator access was just ahead. I slammed my palms against it once, twice, 3 times. It burst outward and I tumbled through, landing hard on the floor of the maintenance corridor. I spun around and kicked the grate back into place just as something lunged at me from the shaft. A hand, gray and rotting and missing 2 fingers. It swiped at my face, caught my cheek with its remaining nails, and I felt skin tear and blood flow. Then the grate was secured and whatever was attached to that hand could not fit through. It screamed, a sound of pure frustration that echoed through the corridor until it faded into the distance. I pressed my hand against my bleeding cheek and ran. The elevator was 50 meters away. 50 meters of corridor lit by flickering emergency lights, shadows dancing on the walls like living things. I ran faster than I had ever run in my life. My lungs burning, my legs aching, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst. I was 20 meters from the elevator when the lights went out. Complete darkness. I stumbled, caught myself, kept moving. My hand found the wall and I used it to guide myself forward step by desperate step. 10 meters. 5. My hand found the elevator door. I slapped at the control panel, found the button, pressed it. Nothing happened. No. The emergency power had failed. The elevator was dead. Behind me in the darkness I heard them coming. Not one set of footsteps, dozens, hundreds, converging on my location from every direction. I pounded on the elevator door. I screamed for help. I did everything a person does when they are about to die and cannot accept it. The door opened. I do not know if it was a miracle or a malfunction or something else entirely. But the door opened, revealing the dim interior of the elevator car, lit by a single emergency light that flickered like a dying heartbeat. I threw myself inside and hit the close button. The doors began to slide shut. A hand reached through the gap, gray, rotting, clawing at the air. I pressed myself against the far wall and watched as the doors continued closing, watched as the hand was caught between them, watched as fingers were severed and fell to the floor of the elevator car. The doors sealed. The elevator began to rise. I slid down the wall and sat on the floor surrounded by severed fingers and laughed. Hysteria, pure hysteria. I was laughing because I was alive and because I was probably going to die anyway and because nothing made sense anymore. The laughter died when I saw my reflection in the polished metal of the elevator wall. The scratches on my cheek, 3 parallel lines where that thing in the shaft had caught me. They were not just scratches. They were deep, ragged wounds already beginning to swell. And they were warm. Not the warmth of inflammation. Something else. Something that pulsed with its own rhythm independent of my heartbeat. Infected. The word floated through my mind, but I pushed it away. I could not think about that now. I had to focus on survival. I had to reach the surface. The elevator continued its ascent. 4 minutes of rising through the earth while my ears popped, and the emergency light flickered, and the severed fingers on the floor slowly began to twitch. I kicked them into the corner and looked away. When the doors opened, I was greeted by stars. The Nevada desert stretched around me, vast and empty and beautiful. The exit point was disguised as an abandoned mining shed, its weathered boards concealing the elevator entrance. I stumbled out into the night air and breathed deeply, filling my lungs with something that was not recycled and filtered and tainted with death. I was free, but I was not safe. The wounds on my cheek pulsed with that strange warmth. I could feel something moving beneath my skin, something spreading through my bloodstream with every beat of my heart. I had maybe 24 hours, maybe less, before the infection took hold completely, before I became one of them. I needed to find shelter. I needed to record what had happened, and I needed to do it before I lost the ability to remember who I was. I started walking toward the distant glow of civilization. Behind me, Site 7 continued its slow collapse into darkness. Ahead of me, something worse was waiting. 700 miles away, Kane Morrison arrived in Dusty Creek at sunset. The town was exactly what he had expected. A main street lined with small businesses. A water tower with the town's name painted on it. Houses spreading outward in neat rows, their lawns brown from the desert heat. What he had not expected was the silence. No cars on the street, no people on the sidewalks, no dogs barking or children playing or televisions flickering behind windows. Just silence, heavy and complete, pressing down on the town like a shroud. And the smell. Kane knew that smell. He had encountered it in 100 war zones, 1,000 battlefields. The smell of death, of bodies left to rot in the sun. He landed the aircraft in a field outside town and approached on foot, his blade ready. The red glow of the weapon cast strange shadows in the dying light. The first body was in the middle of Main Street. A woman, maybe 50 years old, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. She had been torn apart. Pieces of her were scattered across the asphalt in a trail that led toward the residential area. Kane followed the trail. More bodies. A man hanging from a lamppost, his intestines wrapped around his neck like a noose. 2 children lying in a sandbox, their small hands still clutching each other. An old man sitting in a rocking chair on his porch, his head missing. All of them silent, all of them dead. No infected in sight, just the aftermath of their passage. Kane moved faster. Michael's farm was on the outskirts of town, 3 miles from the center. 3 miles of death and silence. He found the farmhouse as the last light faded from the sky. The building was old, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and a barn in the back. It looked peaceful, idyllic. The kind of place where a young man might raise a family, might build a life far from the horrors of the world. The front door was hanging off its hinges. Kane entered. Blood. Everywhere blood. On the walls, on the ceiling, pooling on the floor in lakes that reflected the red glow of his blade. And in the middle of it all, two bodies, Michael's foster parents, the couple who had raised him after Iris died. They had been torn apart and partially consumed, their bones scattered across the living room like discarded toys. Kane stepped over them without pausing. He had seen worse. He had done worse. "Michael." His voice echoed through the empty house. "Michael, are you here?" No response. Kane searched the house room by room. Nothing. The bedrooms were empty. The basement was empty. The attic was empty. Then he heard it. A sound from outside, from behind the house, from the livestock pen. Screaming. Kane moved faster than he had ever moved in his life. Through the back door across the yard toward the pen where Michael kept his animals. He was too late. 7 of them. 7 infected gathered in a circle around something on the ground. Something that was still moving, still screaming, still alive. Michael. His son was on his back in the dirt, his body a ruin of torn flesh and exposed bone. One of the infected was pulling his right arm from its socket, the tendons stretching and snapping. Another had torn open his stomach and was scooping out handfuls of intestine. A third was biting into his face, its teeth sinking into the soft tissue of his cheek. And Michael was conscious. His eyes, pale blue like his father's, were open and aware and filled with agony beyond description. He saw Kane. "Dad, D-Y." The word was barely a whisper, a breath, the last sound a dying son makes when he sees his father for the first time in 26 years. Something inside Kane shattered. He had killed hundreds of people. He had committed atrocities that would damn him for eternity. He had sold his soul piece by piece to survive in a world that wanted him dead. But nothing had prepared him for this. The power that had been building inside him since he first picked up the ritual blade 15 years ago finally found release. It erupted from his body in a wave of black energy that threw the infected backward, sent them flying through the air like leaves in a hurricane. Kane did not watch them fall. He was already at Michael's side, gathering his broken son in his arms. "Michael, Michael, look at me. Stay with me." Michael's eyes focused. For a moment, just a moment, the pain seemed to fade. A smile crossed his ruined face. "You came. I came. I am here. I am so sorry I was not here sooner. I am so sorry for everything." Blood bubbled from Michael's lips. His remaining hand found Kane's and squeezed with surprising strength. "Mom told me about you." Kane's vision blurred. Tears. He had not cried in 15 years. "She said, you were good. Just lost your way. I was lost. I have been lost for so long." Michael's smile widened, even as the light began to fade from his eyes. "But you came. You found your way back." The infected were rising. Kane could hear them getting to their feet, could sense them preparing to attack. He did not care. Let them come. Let them tear him apart. Nothing mattered anymore. "Dad." Michael's voice was barely audible now. "Promise me. Something. Anything. Stop killing. Start saving. Promise me." Kane looked at his son, at the boy he had abandoned, the man he had never known, at the best part of himself dying in his arms. "I promise." Michael nodded. The movement sent blood streaming from wounds that should have killed him minutes ago. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. I love you too." Michael's eyes closed. His hand went limp. His heart stopped beating. Kane held his son's body and screamed. It was not a sound of rage or grief or pain. It was something beyond all of those things. It was the sound of the man who had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life, only to have it torn away in the moment of finding. The infected attacked. Kane killed them. He did not remember doing it. One moment they were lunging at him, and the next they were ash. 7 piles of gray powder settling on the ground around him and his son's body. He sat in the dirt until the sun rose. Then he dug a grave. On the hill overlooking the desert where the morning light touched the earth, first Kane buried his son. He arranged Michael's arms across his chest. He closed those pale blue eyes for the last time. He found a large stone and dragged it to the head of the grave. He used his blade to carve the words into the rock. Michael Morrison, my son. A better man than I ever was. Cain stood before the grave as the sun climbed higher. The desert stretched around him empty and silent. Smoke rose from the town below. He thought about staying, about lying down beside his son's grave and waiting for death. But Michael's words echoed in his mind. Stop killing, start saving. Cain picked up his blade. The red glow seemed different now, softer, less hungry. You were right, he said to the grave. I have been lost too long, but now I will find my way back. He walked away from the grave, away from Dusty Creek, toward whoever needed saving next. I reached the motel at dawn. It was a roadside place, the kind that rented rooms by the hour and did not ask questions, the kind where people went to disappear. Perfect for me. I paid cash for a week. The clerk did not comment on the blood on my clothes or the wounds on my face. She just took my money and handed me a key. Room 7, end of the hall. I locked the door behind me and collapsed onto the bed. Every muscle in my body ached. The wounds on my cheek throbbed with each heartbeat. But worse than the physical pain was the knowledge that kept circling through my mind. Infected. The creature in the shaft had scratched me. Its nails had carried the same pathogen I had spent 18 months perfecting. The same virus that was now spreading through my bloodstream, rewriting my cells, transforming me into something that was not quite human. I should have killed myself right then. I had the blade Morrison gave me. It would have been quick. But I was too much of a coward. I wanted to believe there was still a chance, that maybe the infection would not take hold, that maybe I was different somehow. I am a scientist. I should have known better than to believe in miracles. The first sign came on the second day. The scratches on my cheek had stopped bleeding. That was normal. What was not normal was how they looked. They were healing, not slowly the way wounds normally heal, fast. I could actually watch the edges pulling together, new tissue forming over the damaged flesh. By the third day, the scratches were scars. By the fourth day, the scars had turned black. I told myself it was necrosis, dead tissue discoloring as it decomposed. It was not. Necrotic tissue does not pulse with its own heartbeat. Necrotic tissue does not feel warm to the touch. Necrotic tissue does not spread. By the fifth day, the blackness had extended from the scars down my neck. By the sixth day, it had reached my shoulders. I stopped looking in mirrors. The hunger started on the seventh day. Not normal hunger. Not the kind that could be satisfied with food. This was something else. A craving that lived in my bones, in my blood, in every cell of my body. A craving for something I refused to name. I tried to ignore it. I ate everything in the motel room's mini-fridge. Chips, candy bars, a moldy sandwich that had probably been there for weeks. None of it helped. The hunger only grew stronger. By the eighth day, I could smell the clerk from my room, could hear her heart beat through the walls, could sense the warmth of her blood pumping through her veins. That was when I started recording. If I was going to become one of them, I wanted someone to know what had happened. I wanted my story to survive even if I did not. I wanted the world to understand what was coming. So I sat in that cheap motel room with the curtains drawn and the blade on the nightstand, and I told my story, every detail I could remember. Every horror I had witnessed, every sin I had committed. I do not know where Cain is now. The news talks about riots in multiple states, about violence and chaos spreading across the country. They do not call it what it is. They do not know yet. But I know. I helped create it. I have also heard other stories. Reports of a figure in black appearing in the worst-hit areas. A man with a glowing blade who cuts through the infected and saves whoever he can. They call him the Phantom Savior. They say he appears from nowhere and vanishes the same way, leaving only ash and survivors in his wake. I hope it is Cain. I hope he kept his promise to Michael. The clock reads 2:47 a.m. The hunger is stronger now. I can smell the clerk 2 rooms away, can hear her heartbeat through the walls, can feel the warmth of her blood calling to me. I should use the blade. I should end this before I become something that hurts people. But my hands will not move toward it. My body will not obey. The voice in my head is louder now. Not my voice. Something else. Something that has been growing inside me since the moment those claws tore my flesh. Do not fight it, the voice whispers. Embrace what you are becoming. We will be together forever. 2:58, 2:59, 3:0 a.m. There is knocking at my door. 3 gentle knocks. Like a neighbor coming to borrow sugar. I did not call for anyone. No one knows I am here. The knocking comes again. Sarah, the voice is familiar. Too familiar. Emily's voice. My dead daughter's voice. Open the door, Mommy. I have been waiting so long. I press my hands over my ears. It is not Emily. Emily is dead. Emily has been dead for 7 years. That thing outside is not my daughter. Please, Mommy. The voice is crying now. I just want to see you again. I just want to come home. The knocking continues. Harder now. The door is shaking in its frame. The clock reads 3:07. I can see cracks forming in the wood, splinters falling to the carpet. If anyone is listening to this, please understand. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was just trying to save lives. I was just trying to make sure no other mother would have to watch her daughter die. I failed. I failed at everything. The door is breaking. I can see them through the cracks now. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All of them smiling. All of them hungry. And at the front, wearing my daughter's face, is the thing that has been calling to me since the moment I was infected. The thing I'm about to become. I'm sorry. I am so sorry for everything. If you hear knocking at 3 in the morning, do not answer. They are never who they seem to be. They are never. The door explodes inward. I have just enough time to see them pouring into the room, just enough time to feel hands grabbing my arms and legs and throat, just enough time to understand that this is the end. Not of my life, of everything I used to be. The last thing I hear before the darkness takes me is laughter, and then silence. The recording ended at 3:14 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. You know this because you checked the timestamp. You checked it 3 times, in fact, because something about those numbers felt wrong, felt important, felt like a warning you could not quite understand. You told yourself it was just a story, just words on a screen, sounds in your ears, fiction dressed up as truth to make it more compelling. People create things like this all the time. Internet horror, creepypasta, entertainment for those who enjoy feeling afraid in the safety of their own homes. You closed the browser. You turned off your phone. You went to bed and pulled the covers up to your chin and convinced yourself that none of it was real. Sarah Vance was not real. Site 7 was not real. The Black Plague was not real. You almost believed it. Sleep came eventually the way it always does, pulling you down into darkness whether you want to go or not. You dreamed of nothing, or at least nothing you could remember. Just blackness, deep and complete, pressing against your consciousness like water against the hull of a submarine. When you woke, the clock read 2:58 a.m. You do not remember setting an alarm. You do not remember waking naturally at this hour before. But here you are, eyes open, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling of your bedroom while something cold settles into your stomach. The room is dark, too dark. The streetlight outside your window that usually casts a faint orange glow across your ceiling is not working, or something is blocking it. You cannot tell which. You reach for your phone on the nightstand, wanting light, needing light, but your hand stops halfway. There is something on the nightstand that was not there before. You can feel it without seeing it. A presence, a weight. Something small and cold and impossibly old. Your fingers find it in the darkness, stone, smooth and worn by centuries of touching. Carved into a shape that your fingertips recognize even though your mind refuses to accept it. A figure, human but wrong. Too many arms, too many eyes. A mouth that opens wider than any mouth should open. You have never seen this object before in your life. You have never owned anything like it. You have never even thought about such a thing. But somehow, somewhere in the deepest part of your brain, you know exactly what it is. The statues from the Babylonian tomb, the ones they found with the 7 chained bodies, the ones carved with Sumerian inscriptions that said, "Do not open. They are not dead. They wait." You throw it across the room. The statue hits the wall with a sound like breaking glass, even though stone should not make that sound. You hear pieces scatter across the floor. You hear them rolling, settling, going silent. Then you hear something else, knocking. 3 gentle knocks coming from your closet door that you always keep closed. Your closet door that is now open a crack just wide enough for darkness to spill through. Darkness that seems thicker than the darkness in the rest of your room. Darkness that moves. You tell yourself to get up, to run, to do anything except lie here frozen while something from a story that is not real knocks on a door that should not be open. Your body does not listen. The knocking comes again, harder this time, more insistent. And then the voice. We know you are awake. It sounds like static, like dozens of voices speaking at once, overlapping and interweaving until they become something that is not quite language, something older, something that your bones understand even if your ears do not. We felt you listening to her story. We tasted your fear through the words, and now we are here. The closet door swings open wider. You still cannot see what is inside. The darkness is too complete, too absolute, but you can feel it. Something vast, something hungry, something that has been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. Do not be afraid, the voices say. Fear only makes it easier for us. Fear is the door we walk through. Fear is the blood we drink. Fear is the only thing that has ever been real. A hand emerges from the darkness, gray, rotting, fingers too long, joints in the wrong places, nails that are more like claws. The hand reaches toward you. You finally find your voice. You scream. 700 miles away, Kane Morrison stands on a rooftop in Phoenix, watching the city burn. The infection spread faster than anyone predicted. What started in Site 7 has become a pandemic, a plague, an apocalypse in slow motion. The news stopped broadcasting 3 days ago. The military stopped responding 2 days after that. Now there is only chaos, only fire, only the endless hungry dead and the dwindling ranks of the living. Kane has not slept in 6 days. The ritual blade hangs at his side, its red glow dimmer than it used to be. Every time he uses it, he feels something slip away, some piece of himself that he will never get back. His skin has taken on a grayish pallor. His eyes, once pale blue like his son's, now flicker between red and black depending on the light. He is becoming the thing he hunts. He knows this. He has known it since the moment he first picked up the blade 15 years ago. But Michael's last words echo in his mind every time he considers stopping. Every time he thinks about lying down and letting the darkness take him, stop killing, start saving. So Kane saves. Night after night, city after city, he appears where the infected gather and cuts them down. He pulls survivors from burning buildings. He leads refugees to safe zones that become unsafe hours after he leaves. He fights a war he cannot win because the alternative is to stop fighting entirely. And that is not something he can do anymore. Not after Michael. Below him in the streets of Phoenix, a group of survivors is surrounded. 30 of them, maybe more, huddled in the parking lot of an abandoned grocery store, while hundreds of infected close in from all sides. Kane can see children among them, families, people who were just trying to survive another day in a world that no longer wanted them alive. He could save them. He could drop from this rooftop and carve a path through the horde. He has done it 1,000 times before, but the blade is heavy tonight. His body is tired, and somewhere deep inside him a voice that is not his own whispers, "Why bother? They will only die tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that. The end is coming for everyone. Why not let it come?" Kane closes his eyes. He sees Michael, not as he was at the end, torn apart and dying in a livestock pen, but as he was in the photographs Cain collected over the years. A child taking his first steps, a teenager accepting a diploma, a young man smiling at the camera with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn jaw, a son who believed his father was good, who believed his father could find his way back. Cain opens his eyes. The blade feels lighter now. He steps off the rooftop. You wake up on your bedroom floor. Sunlight streams through the window. Birds sing outside. A car passes on the street below its engine humming normally. The world is ordinary, mundane, safe. Just a dream, you think. Just a nightmare brought on by a creepy story and too much late-night browsing. Your mind playing tricks on you in the vulnerable hours between midnight and dawn. You sit up. Your body aches like you have been fighting something all night. There are scratches on your arms that you do not remember getting. 3 parallel lines, red and raw, running from your wrist to your elbow. You tell yourself you scratched yourself in your sleep. You tell yourself it means nothing. But when you look at your closet, the door is open, just a crack, just wide enough for darkness to spill through. And on the floor, scattered across the carpet, are pieces of black stone. You gather them with shaking hands. The fragments are warm to the touch, warmer than they should be after sitting on the cold floor all night. They fit together like a puzzle, the pieces clicking into place with a sound that is almost like breathing. When you finish, the statue is whole again, as if it was never broken at all, a figure with too many arms, too many eyes, a mouth that opens wider than any mouth should open. You throw it away, into the trash, into the garbage truck when it comes, into the landfill where it will be buried under tons of refuse and forgotten. It will come back. You know this without knowing how you know it. It will always come back. Because the virus does not just spread through contact. It does not just spread through air and water and blood. It spreads through stories. You heard Sarah's story. You felt her fear. You imagined the horror she described in vivid, terrible detail. An imagination like fear is a doorway. We are inside you now. The thought comes unbidden. Not your thought. Something else. Something that has been waiting since the first word of the first sentence of the first recording. We have always been inside you. We were inside your ancestors when they huddled in caves and feared the darkness. We were inside your grandparents when they told ghost stories around dying fires. We were inside your parents when they checked under your bed for monsters. We are the fear that lives in human hearts. We are the darkness that waits beyond the light. We are the thing that knocks at 3 a.m. and never stops knocking until you answer. And now that you know about us, we will never leave you. Tonight when you sleep, we will visit you again. Tomorrow night we will be closer. The night after that, closer still. And one night soon, very soon, you will hear knocking on your door at 3 a.m. You will tell yourself not to answer. You will tell yourself it is just your imagination, just a story, just fear playing tricks on your exhausted mind. But you will answer anyway, because deep down in the part of you that has always known we were real, you want to see us. You want to know what waits in the darkness. You want to understand why humanity has feared the night since the first human opened their eyes and saw shadows moving at the edge of the firelight. We will show you. We will show you everything. And then finally you will be one of us, forever. But somewhere out there, Cain Morrison is still fighting. He does not know your name. He does not know where you live. He does not know that you are sitting in your bedroom right now, staring at a stone statue that should not exist, feeling something cold and ancient settling into your bones. But he knows you are out there. You and millions of others caught in the crossfire of a war between humanity and something that has been waiting since before humanity existed. He knows the darkness is spreading. He knows the plague is growing. He knows the end is coming for everyone eventually. But not today. Today, Cain Morrison is saving 30 people in a parking lot in Phoenix. Tomorrow, he will save more. and the day after that, and the day after that, until there is nothing left of him but ash and memory. Because some battles are worth fighting even when you cannot win. Because some lights are worth carrying even when they are almost gone. Because somewhere in a motel room or a basement or a closet, someone is hearing knocking at their door at 3 in the morning. Someone is wondering if they should answer. And Kane Morrison will be there. Not to save everyone. He cannot save everyone. No one can. But to save someone. One person at a time. One night at a time. One battle at a time. Until the very end. The recording you just heard was found on a server in Nevada, uploaded automatically from a device registered to Dr. Sarah Vance. The timestamp indicates it was created 18 months ago. The device has never been recovered. Dozens of people have listened to this recording since its discovery. Dozens of people have reported nightmares, hallucinations, objects appearing in their homes that should not exist. Dozens of people have disappeared. If you have listened to this recording in its entirety, there is nothing more to be done. The story is inside you now. The fear is part of you. The doorway has been opened, and it can never be closed again. But you have a choice. You can lie down. You can give in. You can let the darkness take you the way it has taken so many others. Or you can fight. You can remember that fear is not just a doorway for them. It is also a warning for you, a signal that something is wrong, a call to action. You can remember that stories do not just spread fear. They also spread hope. They spread courage. They spread the knowledge that you are not alone, that others have faced the darkness before you and survived. You can remember that somewhere out there, Kane Morrison is still fighting, still saving, still carrying a light into the darkness, no matter how dim that light has become. And you can choose to do the same, not with a blade, not with violence, but with the simple, stubborn refusal to give in. With the decision to keep going, keep fighting, keep living, even when the darkness seems overwhelming. That is the only weapon that has ever truly worked against the things that wait in the night. Hope. So when you hear knocking at 3 in the morning, do not answer. But do not hide either. Light a candle, turn on a lamp, call a friend. Do something, anything to push back against the darkness. Because they are coming. They are always coming. But so is the dawn. And until that dawn arrives, there are still people worth saving, including you. Sweet dreams. We will see you soon, but so will Kane Morrison. And he made a promise to his son. He intends to keep it.